It seemed my father and I had the exact same way of keeping order to our things. Whenever my mom told me to clean my room, I simply took a large box and threw everything that by all means shouldn't be laying on the floor inside of it. Then I covered the box with a large blanket, and my room appeared to be the cleanest in the entire world, and my mom was content. My dad only seemed to use drawers instead of boxes. Unfortunately, we didn't see a single ink pad inside of the drawer I opened. We used all our sixth sense to dig through the layers of office materials, but to no avail. All we found was an old candy wrapper and a half-eaten, dried-up whole milk chocolate bar with coconut filling. We were so preoccupied with our search for an ink pad that we didn't even notice my dad entering the office next door. There was a stranger talking to him. I can't say that I ever had a visit from the police before. I can only hope that you don't come bearing any unpleasant news, my dad said, and we heard the sounds of chairs scraping on the carpeted floor. They seemed to have sat down. "The police," Kyle whispered, excitement audible in his voice. "Maybe there is another burglar in town." "Quiet," I shushed him, and drew Kai and Louisa towards the door connecting the two office spaces to give us a better vantage point for eavesdropping and avoid being caught in the act by the people we were eavesdropping on. "Well, the reason for my visit today," we heard an unfamiliar voice, likely the policeman's, "isn't as pleasant as I would like it to be, Pastor. In fact, I just barely managed to keep someone from filing charges against you." "Oh my God, Mr. Strathmas," my dad answered, trying to keep the mood light. I could have easily told him that his attempts were just utterly futile, given how humorless the policeman's voice had sounded. "What were they going to charge me for, Mr. Strathmas? Cycling through the streets with a full beard, sober? Or was it the wearing of shoes with lopsided heels by refusing to smoke a cigarette?" "Now isn't the time for jokes," Mr. Strathmas stopped him, "especially since I've heard that your bicycle isn't at all up to traffic law standards. I've heard rumors about your backlight having a peculiar flickers, and that your braking pads seem to be dangerously worn out." "Ooh, let's change the topic then," my dad interrupted him quickly. "At least until I find the time to exchange my braking pads for new ones. Let's get to the point." "With pleasure," said the policeman. "No, someone whose name I will not disclose, that you seem to have antagonized somehow, wanted to file a charge for trespassing, not even for themselves, but for one of their neighbors." "Me?" Now my dad sounded genuinely surprised. "Tell me, please. I'm always curious to find out any wrongs I might have committed." "Someone witnessed," the policeman continued without a trace of reluctance. Naturally, the three of us were just as curious about my dad's alleged crime as he was. "You breaking into Mr. Lush's arbor sometime last night, around 1.5 hours past midnight." My dad laughed. "What? You are laughing?" the policeman asked, not sure what to do with my dad's reaction. "You're not saying, 'Oh no, it couldn't have been me, I was fast asleep. No way the neighbor saw me break into that poor man's arbor.'" "Yes, I'm not," my dad admitted easily. "But what were you doing, Mr. Lush's arbor, around 1:30 in the middle of the night?" the policeman started wondering. "Did you actually break in? If so, I have to reconsider the neighbor's request for charges." "Obviously you may do that," my dad answered very politely, "but I'm quite certain that you won't have to. The presumed neighbor likely didn't lie to you, but he doesn't seem to have told you the entire truth either way. I had my children with me, my daughter and her little brother, as well as two of her friends. And in that moment I already suspected that my dad suspected us to be standing behind the double door. We just arrived in Michel at 1:30 past midnight, when we suddenly noticed a man sleeping in the middle of the street. I recognized him as Mr. Lusher. He had passed out drunk and probably confused the cold street with the carpet of his living room. We failed to get him to wake up. I went over to Mr. Lusher's house, but didn't want to wake his elderly father, especially since there likely was no point in even trying." "There might be," the policeman confirmed, still sounding doubtful of the entire story. "The old Mr. Lusher is very deaf." "The front door was closed," my dad continued. "There was no way we could have entered, but I couldn't just leave the poor man to lay on the street. It hasn't been too cold outside for the last couple of days, and I knew it likely wouldn't freeze that night. The weather has been extraordinarily mild lately," the policeman explained, interrupting my father once more. "The snow's already melting off the top of the mountains, and I heard that the regulatory office might be considering closing some of the playgrounds due to a heightened risk of flooding. Take care if you see a warning sign. Make sure to keep your children out of any endangered areas. Once the flood retention basin further up the valley is filled up, there is no way to tell that the playgrounds won't be 2 meters underwater in mere minutes, even if it probably won't last long. Especially now, for children that might be less familiar with the local geography, you should consider taking some time out of your schedule and educate them about the current risk." Of course I'm going to do that, but have you considered simply relocating the playgrounds onto a safer, more elevated level of Michtel? Sure. Now it seemed that the policeman felt a little attacked himself, as a representative of the local government and all that. You have to understand that the community here only has so much financial means at its disposal, and a myriad of other more important projects, that a possible relocation of playgrounds has to be put on the back burner for a little. We barely have enough money to buy road salt, and the major's office is in dire need of a new carpet. But enough of this, back to Mr. Lusher. Yes, right, my dad continued. Obviously, we couldn't just let poor drunk Mr. Lusher spend the entire night in the middle of the street. There was at least a chance of freeze and a risk of him being hit by a car whose driver failed to hit the brakes in time. So I and the children picked him up, carried him into his arbor, put him on an old couch, and covered him with a blanket.